Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Pradikacharya Astotar to the Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Pradikacharya Astotar to the Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 26th day of July 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, Chapter 25, the descriptions of the characteristics of King Puranjan. Text number 10. Asit Puranjano Nama Raja Rajan Brihatchavah Tasya Vigyata Namasit Sakavignata chestitaha. Asit Puranjano Nama. Raja Rajan Brihatchavaha. Tasya Vigyata Namasit. Saka Vigyata Chestitaha. Asit Puranjano Nama. Raja Rajan Brihatchavaha. Tasya Vigyata Namasit. Saka Vigyata Chestitaha. Asit Puranjano Nama. Raja Rajan Brihatchavaha. Tasya Vigyata Namasit. Saka Vigyata Chestitaha. Asit Puranjano Nama. Raja Rajan Brihatchavaha. Tasya Vigyata Namasit. Saka Vigyata Chestitaha. Asit Puranjano Nama. Raja Rajan Brihatchavaha. Tasya Vigyata Namasit. Saka Vigyata Chestitaha. Alex, you're up. Asit Puranjano Nama. Raja Rajan Brihatchavaha. Tasya Vigyata Namasit. Saka Vigyata Chestitaha. Asit Puranjano Nama. Raja Rajan Brihatchavaha. Tasya Vigyata Namasit. Saka Vigyata Chestitaha. Asit, there was. Puranjanaha, Puranjana. Nama, named. Raja, king. Rajan, O king. Brihatchavaha, whose activities were great. Tasya, his. Avigyata, the unknown one. Nama, of the name. Asit, there was. Sakha, friend. Avigyata, unknown. Chestitaha, whose activities. Translation. Now it says to King Prachanabarisha, my dear king, once in the past lived a king named Puranjana, who was celebrated for his great activities. He had a friend named Avigyata, the unknown one. No one could understand the activities of Avigyata. Purport. Every living entity is Puranjan. The word Puram means within the body, within this form, and Jana means living entity. Thus everyone is Puranjana. Every living entity is supposed to be the king of his body because the living entity is given full freedom to use his body as he likes. Suppose here means said to be. Every living entity is said to be the king of his body because the living entity is given full freedom to use his body as he likes. He usually engages his body for sense gratification because one who is in the bodily conception of life feels that the ultimate goal of life is to serve the senses. This is the process of karma kanda. One who has no inner knowledge, who does not know that he is actually the spirit soul living within the body, who is simply enamored by the dictation of the senses, is called a materialist. A materialistic person interested in sense gratification can be called a Puranjana. Because such a materialistic person utilizes his senses according to his whims, he may also be called a king. An irresponsible king takes the royal position to be his personal property and misuses his treasury for sense gratification. The word Brihatchavaha is also significant. The word Shavaha means fame. The living entity is famous from ancient times, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2.20. Jayate mriyate va. The living entity, quote, the living entity is never born and never dies, close quote. Because he, the living entity, is eternal, his activities are eternal, although they are performed in different types of bodies. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. He does not die even after the annihilation of the body. Thus, the living entity transmigrates from one body to another and performs various activities. In each body, the living entity performs so many acts. Sometimes he becomes a great hero, just like Hiranyakashipu and Kamsa, or in the modern age, Napoleon or Hitler. The activities of such men are certainly very great, but as soon as their bodies are finished, everything else is finished. Then they remain in name only. Therefore, a living entity may be called Brihat Shavaha. He may have a great reputation for various types of activities. Nonetheless, he has a friend whom he does not know. Materialistic persons do not understand that God is present as the Supersoul, who is situated within the heart of every living entity. Although the Paramatma sits beside the Jivatma as a friend, the Jivatma, or living entity, does not know it. Consequently, he is described as Abhigyata Sakha, meaning one who has an unknown friend. The word Abhigyata Cheshita, also in the verse, is also significant because a living entity works hard under the direction of the Paramatma and is carried away by the laws of nature. Nonetheless, he thinks himself independent of God and independent of the stringent laws of material nature. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita 2.24, Achedyo yam madayo yam akledyo shosya evacha nityak sarvakatakstanu atalo yang sanatanaha. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble and can be neither burned nor dried. He is everlasting, all-pervading. Means he goes everywhere, all-pervading, isn't it? Right? When if you say you're all-pervading, what does that mean? I am all-pervading. We're all all-pervading. No. The living entities are everywhere. That's been fixed. Present everywhere. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. The living entity is Sanatan, eternal. Because he cannot be killed by any weapon, burnt into ashes by fire, soaked or moistened by water, nor dried up by air, he is considered to be immune to material reactions. Although he is changing bodies, he is not affected by the material conditions. He is placed under the material conditions and he acts according to the directions of his friend, the Supersoul. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Sarvasya chaham mridisannivishto mattak smatir jnanam apohanancha. Krishna speaking, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Close quote. Thus the Lord, as the Paramatma, is situated in everyone's heart, and he gives directions to the living entity to act in whatever way the living entity desires. In this life and in his previous lives, the living entity does not know that the Lord is giving him a chance to fulfill all kinds of desires. No one can fulfill any desire without the sanction of the Lord. All the facilities given by the Lord are unknown to the conditioned soul. Is that door still open? Let me close it. Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, with this verse, the actual allegory begins, and Narada Muni is describing this, I call every man, the soul within the body, called Paranjana. Later on, I think it's mentioned that Paranjana can also mean the dweller in the city of the body, just like we have this word Puri. Everyone knows the word Jagannath Puri, means the city of Jagannath. So Puranjana means the living entity dwelling within the city of the body, and it's described in great detail, the different gates and many other things. So, he was celebrated for his great activities. They seem to be great when we have no knowledge of the greatness of the activities of the Lord. And as Prabhupada mentions here, he mentions a couple of great actors, all demons, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, Hitler and Napoleon, but their great activities are all tied to the particular body they're in. Right? This is the great fallacy of material life, is that you completely forget about who you really are, or that there's a God in control, or even demigods in control, and you become absorbed completely in this particular lifetime. And as Prabhupada mentions here, the dictation of the senses. The living entity, Prabhupada says at one point, the mind needs to accept some higher dictation and follow it. And if it's not going to be the super soul and Krishna, the spiritual master, and these, transcendental instructions, it's going to be instructions of the senses or some other person's senses and so forth. In other words, you're going to be under the enthralled to these demands of the material energy. And that's what material life is all about. Now, in most of the species, there's no question of trying to understand the soul or God or anything like that. They're just animals, insects, birds, even trees. They're so covered over that they don't have a reasoning power to understand these higher things. So they're just living through, going up the different species. This is explained nicely in the third canto, where Kapila Dev's teachings to his mother. So the scenario is like this. You get to be the human form, and you're still in gross ignorance, and you perform all kinds of sinful activities, and then you eventually death comes, you get ripped out of the body, thrown into a hellish planet or hellish situation. And Prabhupada one time described it, how all these tortures, if you read the fifth canto, it's hair-raising. The end of the fifth canto, description of all these hells. So what's going on, when the soul in the subtle body is being thrown off some mountain and shattered, you have this extreme pain, but you don't die, taken up again, thrown again. So the consciousness is being covered more and more. This is until you get to the point where you've got this suitable consciousness for the specific body you're going to take in some hellish, species, and then you're born again. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it's all taking place on the subtle platform, on the mind. You don't have a physical body. So the time element, this is a very important point. We've already read, if you read Krishna book, how time can be seem extraordinarily different. That whole pastime with the Brahma Vimohan Leela, where Brahma steals the calves and boys to see if Krishna is really God or what he can do. And he comes back a moment later, by his calculation, by his life, but it's a whole year has passed on earth. So this is an example of it. And the same thing, Prabhupada even refers to dreams. When you're in your subtle body and it dreams you, and you may have all this experience, but when you wake up, a little bit of time has gone by. It's really gone very quickly. So that happens when you're ripped out of the body, when you transmigrate. It seems like a long, long time. Especially, the more it hurts, the slower the time goes, And so it seems like it could be a million years, but it's really very quick, And you've been through all that. Then you get your suitable body and you start experiencing no more karma. You're suffering you're suffering slowly results of previous activity, but you're not incurring any new karma. But you're burning it off the slow way, right? And then you come back up to the human form. And if you have no source of higher knowledge, then you're helpless. Even with the human intelligence, we can see all around us that people are using it for the lowest reasons. They're using it, for sex life and varieties of horrible foods that they eat and the basic principles. And even if it comes to the point of some poetry or philosophy, it's not transcendental. It's just a fancy form of subtle sense gratification on the mental platform, different, lower modes of nature still. So, and then, boom, death comes. You never know when. This is one of the lessons of Bhagavatam. Purgatory is in the prime of life, and suddenly he gets cursed. And now he's got 7 days to live. And we've had several instances in the Bhagavatam where children die. Chitraketu's son dies untimely. Of course, it's a special situation. They brought him back. He was preaching. But the point is, you don't know. And so you're living in this fantasy world. It's just like children. They create a little fantasy. One is the king, and you're playing a game, and you enter into it, and you're really into it. And then your mother comes, let's go have dinner, and breaks up the game. And so it's all one dream after another. It's like a dreamlike existence. So just as Narada Muni's come here. Now Narada Muni is the representative of the Super Soul because he's Abhigyata Saka. The friend of Puranjan is unknown to Puranjan. You go through lifetimes without having any idea that the Super Soul is there. So how is the Super Soul going to get to you? Because he's giving you the intelligence to do your karma and your nonsense, if it's sanctioned. But he also wants you to turn to him, right? The two birds in the tree, the green tree. He's just waiting until you get through with all of your nonsense of sense gratification and turn to him and listen to him and act in a different way for your ultimate benefit. So this is the importance. Bhagavatam is filled with instances of this. Narada Muni is often one of the main protagonists of the preacher. And he represents the Super Soul. He represents Krishna. Because Krishna we can't see. We can't hear him. We can't hear the Super Soul. So we need that help. And that the Super Soul is trying to instruct us. He comes externally as the Guru, Sadhus, and the Shastra. And this is the way we can hear. Of course, we can still refuse because we're too covered, and that happens all the time also. But if somehow we are fortunate and we develop that curiosity, that's the word jigyasa, tato brahma jigyasa is so important, that interest, that inquisitiveness about ultimate questions. Why am I suffering? Who am I? Is there a God? Where did everything come from anyway? These questions which when I was growing up, everybody got to at a certain point, in high school, or at least the people I was hanging out with. Mostly we were just, reading books that didn't really answer the questions, but at least we were interested. But if there's actually the source of proper knowledge that can give you the answer, then your whole life is transformed. Now this is the instance here. Prachanda Bhari has been doing all these sacrifices. Now there was some indication that he already knew that this wasn't, going to help him ultimately, but he really had no recourse. So Narada Muni comes, and remember the previous verse, really heavy. He says, those animals you're sacrificing, thinking that you're going to go to heaven. Well, you made some mistakes, and those animals were waiting for you. Showing them the animals, angry, ready to pierce you with iron horns. That'll get your attention, right? That you go along, and then suddenly there's real life comes in. This is one of the silver linings of this COVID-19, is that for devotees, a lot of devotees are becoming more serious. They're using the time in lockdown, for hearing and chanting. Of course, there's this, this facility of the internet. You can hear lectures and kirtans all the time. But it kind of, makes you come up short and said, hey, I don't know, I may not have so much time that I thought I had. And it's also an opportunity, because of the nature of the whole thing is that there's a threat. The threat is that everybody's feeling it. Most of the time, people, their life of sense gratification is geared toward forgetting that they may die at any time. They can have an accident, all these different things. And to just get into that bubble of sense gratification and forget. It's kind of a drug. It's kind of a drug. I mean, drugs do that anyway. That's what, all right, I'm hurting. There's so many people in this country. I've been fortunate in my lifetime. I mean, I've had some painful physical experiences, but chronic pain, their job or their diet or something, suddenly they're all the time they're in pain. You can imagine living like that, And then of course, okay, we can take a drug. This is the answer to it. But of course, that eventually produces more suffering. We know that. So all of sense gratification is like that. You attempt to forget the past and the future and just live in the now and experience some high, sensory experience. And in this way, deal with life, which is often so painful. And part of it is, remembrance, let's do it again. And in that anticipation is part of the whole experience of sense gratification. And in the process, you're completely forgetting the goal of life. You're forgetting who you are. You're in deep ignorance. And you're paving a way for huge suffering. Sense gratification means, there's some pleasure there, but it's flickering. It comes and it goes. What does Krishna say? We can all chant together. 5th chapter. Yehi sangsparshaja bhoga dukkha yona evate. Adyanta bantak konteya nate shuramate buddha. We have to be Buddha in this human life, intelligent, and think about things. So Krishna is directly telling us, the super soul, right? He's giving us good instruction. He's saying that very pleasure that you're enjoying from the contact of the senses with the sense objects, sangsparshaja means born of the contact of the senses with the sense objects. That's what the word means. That bhoga, enjoyment. Dukkha yoni, it's the source, it gives birth to misery. Dukkha yoni evate. And it has a beginning and an end, and therefore the wise don't take their pleasure there. So that's a revolutionary statement. It undercuts the entire, gestalt of this whole civilization. Right? You know the word gestalt? Look it up later. It means the whole structure of meaning and reasons why you do things. It's a good word. 521? Oh, I think you're right. You mean the number of the verse? Yeah. Yeah. And verse before that says the alternative. Now, the Krishna, we're not, the devotees are meant to be the greatest enjoyers. We're going for broke, eternal, ever-increasing, unimaginable bliss, and suffering, down to zero. That's what we're striving for, And the amazing thing about it is to really experience that. You have to forget all about it. Forget all about your own enjoyment. I mean, in periods of reflection, you're striving for that. But in the actual work that you do, you'll experience the happiness when you forget all about your happiness, and you start, serving the devotees and the name and working for Krishna's pleasure, even though it may be physically or mentally difficult. In other words, minimize the sense gratification, but actually you're going to maximize the real pleasure, the spiritual pleasure, which doesn't end. Ultimately, it does not end. It has a beginning in our conditioned life, but it's going on all the time, and we have to enter into it and become qualified for that. So that's the problem with Puranjan. All he knew until this point was working for this, trying to get to heaven to enjoy, But he's making so many mistakes. He's ensuring the total misery here. Prabhupada, I hear lectures all the time of Prabhupada, and he's I forget it's in the 2nd chapter somewhere, where he's describing, because someone asked, well, what about this animal sacrifice, that's mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says it's not actually killing the animal, because of the mantras that chanted just right and everything, they immediately get a new body, a higher body, So it's not like, but you can see how easily it'd be corrupted. Once you can't chant those mantras, you don't have the Brahmins and, you get slack. You just chant some old mantra and you slaughter and then eat. And that's what happened in India. That's why Buddha came. Because, ahimsa, but he had to reject the Vedas because the Vedas have the karma kanda. So the wonderful thing about Kali Yuga that it's so bad, there's no question of, the slow process of we'll go through karma kanda and like that. And then Lord Chaitanya comes, Krishna comes to Lord Chaitanya, and he gives the process, just cut through the whole thing. Chant Hare Krishna and associate with real devotees and become so purified, you completely avoid this material, slow process of material purification. But it has to be done right. That, otherwise, you're just prolonging the agony. So and that's made very explicit. I was just thinking, because this is Prabhupada quotes this verse, of the verse in the 3rd canto where Devahuti is praising Kapila Deva about the holy name. What is it? Oh God. Ahobada shapachoto gariyan yajjagagre vartate namatubhyam te pustapaste juhavu sasnaraya brahmanuchu namagunantiyete. Now this verse, I don't know about you, but I think many devotees, when they read this verse, says, wow, she's talking about us. Bhata means how wonderful it is. Shrapachoto, even the dog eaters, who are said to be, the lowest. Well, I always wondered about that, which means there's hardly even any cow eaters in that society. Cow eaters are worse, right? Yeah, they couldn't imagine eating the cow at that point. But the dog eaters, outside of the Vedic culture, yes, ahobada shrapachoto gari, and even if they're born as dog eaters, how glorious they are! If even on the tips of their tongues is uttering the holy name. In other words, they're not purely chanting yet; they're just chanting somehow or other. Then they must have performed all kinds of austerities, visited the holy places, bathed in the holy places, and studied all the Vedas and all the different things. In other words, they did all that, but they didn't go back to Godhead. They came here in the Kali Yuga, or not Kali Yuga, wherever they are in Satya Yuga, and there's still, didn't purify them. But the holy name is so purifying and so powerful that it cuts through all of that and gives us a chance to purify, to become purified. So Puranjan is a different time, and he's not going to talk to him, I think, about chanting the holy name in this particular pastime. But he's going to talk about becoming a devotee of Krishna. So right now, and for all these verses now, is going to be very, very illustrative, because he's talking about every man, means all of us have this experience that Puranjan is having. And that is just dwelling within the body. And then he's going to encounter, I think, personified intelligence. And anyway, there's a woman in the forest, and they get together and it's enjoying. And then eventually time comes, and all the agents of time, the different days and nights, and the life air becomes weaker. That it's very dramatic. And what we're supposed to get out of this is that it's foolish to try any kind of strategy for sense gratification, even the mode of goodness, because all it does is just postpone the agony. It makes you think that there's some way of enjoying in this material world and being successful, but it means defeat. This is defeat. As soon as you turn toward the idea of sense gratification, it means that you're prolonging the agony in the material world. As Rishabdev says, Rishabdev is an incarnation of Krishna, actually. Parabhavas tavadabodha jato yavan jigyasata atma tattvam. He says, Parabhavas means defeat. That means taking a birth again in material, but without any assets of Krishna consciousness. That defeat, that birth and death, is born of ignorance. Abodha jato literally means born of ignorance. Parabhavastava the bodha jato yavan jigyasadatma tattvam. And therefore, very logically, it will continue. That's what tavad means. It will continue until and unless you inquire into the truth of the soul and God. Abodha jato yavan means this long. As long as you don't do this, this will happen. As long as you don't inquire into the absolute truth. That's the Vedanta Sutra. That's the beginning of the Vedanta Sutra, of which the Bhagavatam is the commentary. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. It's mentioned in the second chapter, first canto. Kamasanindya Priti, Labo Jivata Yavata, Jivasa Tattva Jigyasa. It keeps coming up because Bhagavatam is a Vedanta Sutra commentary. So, how does it work? So, as long as you don't inquire into the truth of the soul and God and all these different things, then you'll remain in ignorance, and that'll keep you taking birth again. Now, the mechanism is the mind. Mind is the whole key for transmigration, right? Mind is the worst enemy of the living entity and his best friend. The mind attached to material sense gratification is the worst enemy. The mind attached to Krishna is the best friend. So then the second part of the verse says, Tavat kriyas tavat idam manovai karmatmakam yena sharira bandha. Now, whenever you see a word like yena or ends in ena, it's instrumental. It means that by means of this something's going to happen. So it says tavat kriya. Kriya means material activities, karmic activities, fruitive activities. So that you will be performing karma activities as long as your mind is karmatmakam. Your mind is filled with all ideas of sense gratification or avoiding pain. That's the flip side. If that's all you're thinking about, you're tightly conditioned. And that mind will encourage you or guide you to perform karmic activities. Like Puranjan is doing here to try to go to heaven, or millions of people that try to avoid pain. I'm going to stay home, I don't want to get the COVID. Take this, whatever. A lot of it is now negative, but that's still karmic activity. So, tavat kriyas yavadidam manovai. No, yavat kriyas tavadidam manovai karmatmakam yenashita. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. That you'll be performing in ignorance all kinds of fruitive activities. And that will make the mind karmatmakam, filled with desires of how to increase the pleasure and avoid the pain. That the mind is filled with that. And as long as you die with a mind filled with those ideas, that will take you to another material body. That's the science of it. So he doesn't leave us hanging. Third verse in the series, quoted in the purport of Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada quote them all the time. Evam, thus, evam manak karma vashan puyunkte. When the mind is moved under the impulse of these fruitive desires, evam manak karma vashan puyunkte avidyapan upadiyamana. You remain in ignorance and you're... Therefore, pritir nayavan mai vasudevi namuchate dehi yogena tavan. This is a very interesting line. Pritir, love. Now he's talking about love all of a sudden. Pritir nayavan mai vasudevi. As long as there is no love for me, Vasudeva, he reveals, I'm Vasudeva. This is Rishabdev speaking. Pritir nayavan mai vasudevi namuchate dehi yogena tavat. As long as you don't have love for me, you will never be able to break free of the bondage of a material body. So this is what we're aiming for. We're aiming for priti. We're aiming for prema. That's the goal. Along the way, we will get liberation. It's actually a byproduct. But especially in our conditioned state, just like Puranjan here, Prachana Barishad, he has been paving a way toward a lot of suffering. I mean, how many animals has he killed? And they're all waiting with their iron horns. You can imagine how horrible that's going to be. So now it has come to save him from that. And that's why he's listening with great attention. Not because he's being attracted by the beauty of Krishna and his smile and all these things. Not yet. This is why so much emphasis is put, beginning of Bhagavad Gita, the difference between the soul and the body, transmigration of the soul, is that the impetus toward breaking free of this painful situation body is very important, especially in the early stages of devotional service. But as you chant and hear and serve Krishna, the attractiveness of Krishna helps. In other words, then you have two things going on. The wonderful and attractive Krishna consciousness, the devotees, the deities, the holy name, the literature, descriptions of Krishna Lila, and in the back of your mind, I don't want to mess around with the material energy because I'll suffer like anything. I don't want to come back even once. Why prolong the agony? Yes, I know, I've done some devotional service, therefore I won't stay in a human body. But who wants to be packed up 9 months, and suffer like anything? This whole world is going to hell in a handbasket. Forgive the, come on. The Arctic is heating up 100 degrees, in the Arctic Circle, and the fires are burning, and the permafrost is melting, and the carbon's going, and everything. This is happening right now. Who knows if we're even going to make it through this body? We'll forget about COVID and all the other stuff's going on. So it's very urgent. That's the point. It's urgent that we take it seriously and take this wonderful allegory and all these purports Prabhupada describes here. He's giving a whole lesson here. Okay, that was the previous verse. Yeah. But, without signature, the word Shravā means fame. Now, notice the Avigyata appears twice in the verse, that he's the unknown friend, and his activities are unknown. But, see, this is what's so wonderful about it, is that we have the super soul. And just to contemplate this truth, that he knows everything. He knows everything we're thinking, he knows everything we've done, and everything that's going to happen to us, So talk about surveillance. Isn't there in the Bill of Rights? They can't invade your home, without probable cause, all this stuff, because they were doing that. The British were coming in, they would contest, open mail and everything, trying to find out who's the seditionists and all that. So the idea is you don't want people to know everything about you because you don't trust that they really have your best interests in mind. You don't trust the government that all the people there, they have best in there, as long as I'm, and plus what I did maybe is not so kosher. No, but we can accept the super soul because we know that he's our best friend. The point is, he only has our best interest in mind. He has no interest of his own, right? He's giving us intelligence, knowledge, forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is very good sometimes. Ask these guys with PTSD. You come back from these wars, horrible wars, prolonging for 20 years. There's absolutely no reason why the United States has been in Afghanistan for 20 years, almost 20 years now. What? For what? Not for their benefit or anyone else's. It's going on. So you go, you poor guy joins the army, because he has no other prospects. When I come out, I'll be able to get an education or something, and gets put in a situation where he's killing babies. Comes back, and the poor guy is like broken from that. This is what a lot of the PTSD is from, and even the suicides from that, all because of our crazy government. So that's the nature of this material world. You get tangled up in all these things, but the super soul is, Krishna is giving us good instructions through Prabhupada, through the books, through the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam. Don't go that direction. There's a whole different way of life, which is for the benefit of the soul, and which connects you to God, and it's a blissful. You're actually on the road to ultimate happiness in that way. But we require to be cured. We're like addicts, cured of our fascination with the flickering material senses and the sense gratification. And that's this extended allegory from the Bhagavatam is part of that lesson. I'm telling you, when these books came out, I was there. When I joined, we had part of the third canto. We didn't even have. My first proofreading job was on the battle between Lord Boar and Hiranyaksha. And that's the latter part of the third canto, middle of the third canto. And so as these books came out, they revolutionized everybody's consciousness. You can imagine. Kapila Dev's teachings, which is so detailed and complete, how the false ego interacts and everything comes about. Wonderfully illuminating. And then all of the fourth canto we've read, Dhruva and all these things. It's changed it. And this also, very, very much, the story of Puranjan. It was just provided so much illumination and preaching points and things like that. So, and now we have the whole Bhagavatam, the fifth canto and the sixth. Every book is filled with wonderful instruction. And I was just thinking of one verse. One verse can just open up your whole mind, to this thing. 12th canto. There's a whole chapter about the different kinds of annihilations, and one of them is our own death, But there's various annihilations that are partial, and then there's a full annihilation, And there's a whole chapter of that. At the end of the chapter, that's this verse. I think it's Shukadeva and Pariksit at that point. He says, so one devotee reminded me of this verse. Sangsara sindham ati dustadam utti tirshor nanyak plavo bhagavatak purushottamasya Lilakatavasa nishevanam antarena pungso bhaved vivada dukkha davardi tasya. Very, very good, wonderful verse. So the first word is sangsara sindhum. You know what that means, Vijay? Yes, we're all in this ocean of birth and death. Why ocean? It's very unsure what's going to happen. We're trying to stay afloat, but if some waves, very dangerous position. Prabhupada experienced directly on that trip here. So we should be ati dustadam, very, very. Dustadam means difficult to cross over. Ati dustadam means extremely difficult to get over. Very, a lot of waves and huge. In other words, impossible without help. So we need a boat. But first we have to be utti tirsha, it means eager to cross over. If we're trying to, enjoy it and we don't know we're in an ocean, we think this is all there is, then we're not eager to. So if you're wise enough to know, I want to cross over this ocean and get to that point of peace and happiness, Okay, that's good. So you right away he says, Nanyak plavo. There's no other boat. What is that boat? No other boat than Nanyak plavo bhagavatak purushottamasya lila katarasa nishevanam. Then developing and nourishing the taste for hearing and chanting the lila kata, the pastimes of the Supreme Person, Krishna. Purushottamasya. Nanyak plavo bhagavatak, Bhagavan, the Supreme Person, lila katarasa nishevanam. Antarena means there's no other boat. Antarena. Pungso bhaved. For the persons who are very eager to cross over, and vivada dukkha dabaditasya, who are suffering so many varied pains and sufferings that are just like fire, being in a fire. So you got both of those go. Usually it's compared to one or the other. But here you're in a forest fire, suffering something, and you're also on the ocean. Double jeopardy. So that's what Bhagavatam is. And the Leela Kata, it means not just Krishna Leela in Vrindavan, which is the ultimate, we want to hear and chant that, but also creation and all the other things. This is also Leela Kata, Narada Muni, means the Leela of Krishna and his devotees. And Narada Muni is always bringing people to Krishna as he is here, So the Bhagavatam is actually our savior, saving grace. We should cultivate knowledge. We should, study it, discuss it, memorize. Famous Prabhupada's given us examples, so many famous verses, and in this way, get closer to Godhead. Okay, I'll end there. Let me just read this translation again. Okay, my dear king. Now, so he starts his allegory now. Once upon a time, in the past, lived a king named Puranjan, who was celebrated for his great activities. He had a friend named Avigyata, the unknown one. No one could understand the activities of Avigyata. Any discussion? We're missing Balaram. He always had some question and comment. I guess we knew we wouldn't have any discussion. That's why we didn't even manifest the mic. Oh, you got the mic? Okay. All right. I'll end with something sweet. How about something sweet? Okay. So this is not a Sanskrit poem, but this is it's based on Krishna's pastimes, but it was written English. But it goes with a painting. We've seen this painting, a wonderful painting of Krishna and Balaram running ahead of their friends, and there's the cows behind them. They're on the bank of the Yamuna. The day is beginning, and they're free now of the parents watching them. So they say, Krishna says, "Let's go," said Krishna. "Don't delay at all." And he and Balaram began to run ahead of all their cowherd friends who called, "Oh Krishna, Rama, let us join the fun." And off they ran to Braja's forest haunts, to play in every bower, grove, and sward. The boys would tease their friend with playful taunts, forgetting his position as the Lord. Shri Krishna is inviting us as well to join him in his pastimes, which enthrall. The wise heed Krishna when they hear him tell. Let's go, my friends, do not delay at all. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.